an important part of working with a student who does display challenging behaviors, because what we do in that moment can kind of make or break their long-term success. So it's really important to kind of be aware of a few things as we're working through these types of situations, so we help that behavior decrease over time rather than increase, right? So as we go through, feel free to ask questions, and hopefully I can fly through this. Okay, so today again, we're going to spend some for our kids. A lot of them engage in sensory maintained behaviors, so we're teaching them how to access that sensory time, when, where, okay, all the parameters around it. Because if we're teaching those skills and we're teaching them how to communicate what they need independently, they're not going to have any need for the big bad behaviors anymore, and that's what we want. Okay. However, we do know that a child with chronic challenging behaviors, if you have them in their class, or even disruptive behaviors, right? They don't need to be the flipping tables and eloping that we might deal with in SBBS, but non-compliance, flopping on the floor, continuously yelling or screaming, right? Those are disruptive. Those get in the way of their learning. So we're really going to be focusing on today number 4 and number 5 of this escalation curve. Really, once they're getting to that point where they have just lost rationality, right? We know a lot of our children in life skills have deficits in the area of communication, so their receptive and expressive language is already pretty low for some of them, and when they're escalated, we know that goes down even further. So given a student with an IQ, say, of 75 in crisis, that drops even more, okay? So their ability to process language goes way, way down, okay? I think of myself in interviews when they ask me what my name is, and I forget for some reason, right? Under stress and under pressure, it can get ugly. Okay. We also did a training the other day, not with this group, but it was on how to respond and support kids in that level 2 and level 3 stage. So that anxiety, when you start to see those precursors. So Donna Freeman's going to upload that training. If you're interested in that training, that would be a good one to watch. And it'll kind of bring the consequence, or what happens right after the behavior determines the function of the behavior or the purpose of it. Okay. So if I have a student who is flopped on the floor, okay, because I didn't give them the bag of chips that they wanted, and they're flopping on the floor, and we want the behavior to stop, and I immediately say, okay, you can have the chips, right? What I did right after that problem behavior, I gave them the chips, okay? That function of behavior would be tangible, right? They were engaging in the behavior to access something, and my response would have reinforced that behavior and made it stronger. Okay. For a child that you may present a non-preferred task and they elope, right? If I never make them do the math task again, right? I'm reinforcing that behavior. Okay. So what we do right after really can make or break their success long term. So really quickly, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the reasons for behavior there's 4 of them, okay? So students engage in behavior, and really every human engages behavior for these 4 reasons, okay? Some of our students have a need for attention. And when we talk about attention is attention, whether it's positive or negative, okay? Students engage in disruptive or challenging behaviors because sometimes they have a need or want to escape or avoid something aversive. It might be a task. It might be a situation, right? We know a lot of our students struggle with social skills, okay? That can be aversive to them. It might be a specific person or an environment, okay? Some of our students engage in problem behaviors that are maintained by access to an item, so access to their preferred activity, okay? A lot of our students in life skills and structured learning also engage in problem behaviors that are maintained by sensory input. So if you have students that rock or do loud vocalizations or continuously flap their hands, right? They don't need us to do that. They're doing that on their own. They're reinforcing themselves, basically. Okay. However, we know that can get in their way of learning significantly, and we can actually teach them there's a time and a place to engage in sensory behaviors, right? If you get a job one day, right, we can't be screaming when we're trying to do our job, okay? So it's up to us to teach them when and where and how and the parameters of engaging in that sensory behavior. Okay. So when we're talking about how to intervene in a crisis, or how to intervene when one of your students is showing disruptive or challenging behavior, we really have two routes we can go, okay? We can either react or respond, okay? And I'm sure you know which one we would preferably do, okay? So when we react, and a lot of our students react, right? They don't stop and think. There's no space between that thought or the action, right? It's unconscious, okay? So we're not necessarily taking into consideration the long-term effects of how we might be impacting that child, okay? So when we react, we're really doing it based on our thoughts and feelings in that moment, okay? And for us, sometimes reacting can reinforce our own behavior and lead to us reacting over and over again, right? It can be easy to react rather than respond, because when we get stressed, I know that some crisis situations I've been in with students, I can feel my adrenaline kick in, right? And that can affect what we do or say in that moment, okay? So we have to be cognizant about that, right? We want to be responding, okay? We want to be thoughtful about what we're saying, what we're doing. We want to take into consideration what are going to be the long-term effects on this child if I say this, or if I do this, or if I give him the iPad, or if I don't give him the iPad, right? We want to consider all of these things, and really we want to do it ahead of time, because we don't have time to be doing that in the middle of a crisis, right? Desks are flying, chairs are flying, okay? When we think about responding, we often recommend to think of what we call the risk versus the benefit, okay? So what is the risk of responding in this way, okay? If a child is throwing a tantrum on the floor and I say, you need to stop or else I'm gonna call your mom, right? What is the risk of doing that versus the benefit of doing that, okay? If a, student is, smacking on the table because they don't want to do their math, okay? And I am, blocking them from smacking the table and re-administering that directive. Nope, buddy, it's time to do my math, okay? I want to think about what is the risk of me saying that and doing that versus the benefit of it, okay? And that'll kind of help you determine which one is going to be a more harmful response and which one's going to be a more productive response long term, okay? So we're going to now go through some examples of, typical frequent reactions for different functions of behavior that I have done myself in the past, because I have been reacting rather than responding, okay? Some of these we see commonly when we consult. It doesn't mean you're doing anything right or wrong. We tend to think of things as, is this effective or ineffective, okay, rather than right or wrong. So it can be easy and fairly common that if you have a child with escaped maintained behavior, so they're engaging in a problem behavior because they want to avoid something or get out of doing something, we might give in, okay? We're all well-meaning, right? We might give in and not follow through with that demand, okay? We might also allow the escape or avoidance for a really long time, right? So if I have a student, I'm just going to go back to the flopping on the floor example. If I have a student and it's math time and they're flopping on the floor because they don't want to do their math, and I say, okay, don't worry about it, we'll do it later in the day, right? I might think, hey, I'm not letting them escape, they're doing it. But for them, that behavior was effective to put off math. And I am a procrastinator, right? So again, I put things off. I don't throw a fit about it, right? But that behavior could be effective for that student based on the way we responded, right? If I say, okay, don't worry about it, we'll do it later. Woo, that tantrum worked, right? Next time it's math, they're probably going to do that again, okay? Sometimes we might accidentally provide too much assistance. And this is something we need to be really careful about with our students in life skills programs, because we do a lot of prompting because they need a higher level than some of our other kids, right? But if they're engaging in problem behavior to avoid a task or avoid a demand, and we go in and over prompt or help them too much to get that done, our response might be reinforcing that behavior, okay? Because then we have kind of changed that behavior, the tantrum, to accessing a lot of our help, right? And the next time they want something done for them, they're going to be more likely to engage in that problem behavior because we've accidentally reinforced it, okay? Sometimes we have kids that engage in escape maintained behaviors, and we might change the demand. Okay, you don't want to do this? Fine, we'll do something else, right? Giving choices and changing things is totally fine when they're either calm or in those really early stages of the escalation cycle. But when we are changing things at this really high level in the behavior escalation cycle, okay, we have now reinforced a problem behavior of this level of intensity, okay, then reinforcing one at this level intensity, okay? So we always say intervene early rather than late, okay? Because we can accidentally reinforce a behavior of this level of intensity, okay? And the next time they have that need, they're going to be more likely to jump to that bigger, badder behavior even quicker because that's what they had to do last time to get that need met. Does that make sense? For our attention maintained behavior kids, right, this is a super tricky one because attention is extremely powerful. And attention can be accidentally presented in various forms, whether we think we're doing it or not, right? We might sigh, we might change our tone of voice, we might have, certain body language. We are educators. A lot of us are parents. We want to calm them down. We want to soothe them. We want to help them through that crisis. But if we're rubbing their back, telling them it's okay, and all of these other things, and their behavior is maintained by attention, not escape, attention, then we're likely reinforcing and strengthening that problem behavior, okay? If we are stating the consequences in the middle of behavior, you're losing recess, I'm gonna call your parents, right? You're gonna lose a token, okay? If we're doing that in the middle of the crisis, and they're maintained by attention, that's probably going to strengthen it because we are giving them some type of attention, okay? A lot of times we might need to let the other peers know that they need to ignore, right? This is a common one. But if we're saying in front of the class, we're ignoring right now, right? And I'm saying that out loud, that's giving that child some level of attention because we're commenting on their behavior, okay? For a lot of our kids, they might engage in behaviors that are maintained or the function is something else, like access to something or escape from something. For a lot of our kids, it's hard not to give some type of level of attention, right? Because they're big, bad behaviors, they're disruptive, okay? The antecedent is something that we have control over a lot of the time. Sometimes we don't, right? And again, that's where all of our efforts, not all of them, but the majority of our efforts should be, right? These are the proactive things. And we kind of talked about that already, like the pre-corrections, making sure tasks are appropriate, teaching replacement skills. Again, we want to do a lot there, okay? No reaction is better than some reaction, especially if we don't have a Dunkin' Donuts. But therefore, it's so important for us to have a plan, okay? How am I going to react to Johnny if he throws a tantrum today? What am I going to say? What am I going to do? Because again, we want to respond in a way that decreases that challenging behavior, right? Oh, math didn't go away because of your elopement, or math didn't go away because of your escape. I had to get a little creative with some of my kids who engaged in escape behaviors when it came to specials. and they would magically come down from their crisis when music ended, like a minute after. I don't know how they did that in their mind. They must have an internal clock, right? But I was ready with some type of activity that had to do with that special they missed. Or the way I did it in my class is every staff was responsible for the student that they were working with at that time. So if it's math block and I have 3 center rotations running and there's a crisis, I am responsible for the 2 kids that are at my center. You are responsible for the kids that are at your center, okay?